Troops are in the streets of Nairobi. Sir Evelyn Baring, the governor, salutes the men of the Lancashire Fusiliers who have flown in to help clear his colony of the Mau Mau menace, which has struck fear into Kenya's very heart.
On October the 20th, 1952, the government of Kenya, supported by 40,000 white settlers and the British Army, declared war on 6 million Africans, and on the Kikuyu people in particular. The governor of Kenya announced that due to the widespread activities of the Mau Mau society, he had been forced to declare a state of emergency.
In Nairobi, capital of Kenya, Europeans and Africans still walk the streets in fear of the dreaded Mau Mau. For it is that band of fanatics whose bloody deeds have cast a dark shadow across the face of Kenya. Some are brought in to face justice, others are shot in fights with police and troops, but thousands more escape to continue their crusade of murder and violence. There is little reliable information about the setup of the terrorist organization, for few members even know from whom they take their orders. They obey blindly, savagely attacking the defenseless, burning, looting, murdering. Kenya is the battlefield of a conflict that cannot end until the Mau Mau is dissolved forever.
The emergency, which was expected to last for a few weeks, went on for 7 years. It took the lives of at least 15,000 Africans, none of whom could possibly have had anything to do with Mau Mau, for Mau Mau never existed. At the end of the Second World War, Kenya's Africans were impatient with colonialism. They had been ruled by Britain for 50 years with little to show for it. In the rural areas, they were confined to overpopulated reserves. In the towns, thousands were homeless. They were not permitted to elect their political representatives. They were forbidden to grow valuable cash crops. They were neither men nor women. They were natives. And in everything they did, they faced a color bar. In an effort to change things, they now threw their support behind a mass nationalist movement, the Kenya African Union.
The political activity were terrific. We have aroused the political enthusiasm of the people throughout the country in order that they should fight for their rights.
But Kenya's white settlers were also impatient after the war. They were less than 1% of the colony's population, but for half a century, they had dominated its political and economic life. They had no intention of letting their mother country, Britain, sacrifice their interests to the cause of African self-determination.
Their objective was to hold on to Kenya, which had the largest European population amongst the 3 East African states, and to make this a white man's country. That was their objective. It was the objective of the settlers, and they were supported by the British government.
When you consider that the people here in Kenya, the masses of the Africans here in Kenya, are probably roughly about the same stage as Great Britain was 500 years ago, we do not think that normal forms of democracy are suitable.
In the face of the intransigence of the settlers and the indecisiveness of the British government, the moderate policies of the KAU, or COW as the Kenya African Union was known, seemed to be making little headway.
COW didn't want to provoke the situation at all. We thought by the normal democratic methods we will get our way. In other words, what we were asking for in this was just really human justice. We asked for more representation in Parliament. We asked for more money on education, agriculture, and so on. So for some time, there was a feeling in COW to continue that sort of struggle. And the others who said, no, this is not going to work, let's fight it out.
One of those who was prepared to fight, if necessary, was Solomon Memier. He had been in politics since the mid-1930s as a leader of the Kikuyu Central Association. When this party was banned in 1940, Memier took it underground and helped carry it through into the post-war period. We organized a secret political movement when we realized that things were moving too slowly with the Kenya African Union. Our movement was based on an oath, which was intended to give our people courage to fight for our land and for our freedom. The first oath that members of the underground movement were required to take was known as the Oath of Unity. It bound them together and strengthened their support for more militant political action. We used an oath to help people understand what the struggle was about. Many people were cowards. They were frightened of politics. They said it was bad for us to set ourselves against the Europeans. We decided to put courage into them, and to do this, we had to give them an oath and tell them, we want you to be ready to die fighting for this land, fighting the white man until he stops ruling us, until the land he has stolen comes back to us. Then we shall have our freedom and not be ruled badly by the colonial government. The underground organizers embarked on a campaign to unify the entire African population. The settlers and the colonial government gradually became aware of the oathing ceremonies, and in 1950, the government outlawed the Mau Society, which they said was responsible for administering illegal oaths. The words Mau meant nothing in any language in Kenya. We knew ourselves as the Kiama Jia Kwitia Wiathi, the Freedom Struggle Association. Mau was a name coined by the Europeans to discredit the movement and to confuse the waverers. There was no such thing as Mau. It was an invention of the Europeans. To the settlers and to their allies in the colonial government, the Kenya African Union and Mau were one and the same, and Jomo Kenyatta, Kau's president, was the leader of both. Kenyatta, however, had little or nothing to do with the organization of the underground movement. He was its symbolic leader, but he stood back from the methods it was prepared to employ. Kau is not a fighting union that uses fists and weapons, Kenyatta told his followers. If any of you here think that force is good, I do not agree with you. Remember the old saying that he who is hit with a club returns, but he who is hit with justice never comes back. In 1952, the settlers refused to believe a word Kenyatta said. He was the symbol of everything they loathed, the focus of everything they feared. At one point, they even called for his liquidation. By the middle of 1952, hundreds of thousands of Africans, mostly Kikuyu, had taken the Oath of Unity. A more militant set of leaders had taken over most of the top offices in Kau. Mass meetings of unprecedented size took place, at which the demands for self-government and for the return of expropriated lands were made with new confidence. The settlers felt threatened by this militancy, but they were more disturbed by the prospect of the British government coming to a political settlement with the Africans, as was happening already in West Africa. Self-government under permanent white leadership had always been the settlers' goal in Kenya. In order to realize that objective, they now embarked upon a campaign to crush African nationalism. At this point, it's very important to look at the chronology of the events which led up to the declaration of the emergency. Sir Philip Mitchell, Kenya's governor since 1944, retired in June 1952. Mitchell had been a thorn in the settlers' side. While they claimed that discontent was growing into revolt, Mitchell was saying that things had never been better.